But we'll start. So usually I have a script that I go by, so that I don't miss the points. But today I'm embracing the F word. I'm ready to miss points and embrace failure. This is something that I wish I was encouraged to do in my younger days, because I'm trying to do that today because I've been listening to books and listening to psychologists saying how critical a piece it is for your growth. And the analogy that always comes to my mind is nobody walks without falling a few hundred times, so you just have to that's such a natural process, right? So I think when we hear failure, we sort of look down on it like it's something, but falling down is not bad. So failure, so I'm here unprepared for my usual script. I'm Cicely George, the Executive Director of Thai Dubai, and super pleased to have all of you here today. I know some of you resonated with the title of today's session. Himanshu is going to take you through a ride, and we hope we're going to be better failures tomorrow at it. So I'll talk a little bit. How many of you are new here in terms of Thai? Like, who do you know about Thai or not really? That's great. So Thai is an organization that started as a conversation in Silicon Valley over 30 plus years back. And today we have around 64 chapters in 14 countries. So it's a not-for-profit organization, and it's built on the backbone of successful entrepreneurs. They're called charter members. So they form the board. And so Kalina, Piero, Himanshu, they're all charter members. They're in a place to give, and they help support the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And we've been here in the region since the last 23 years in TCOM with DIC, and older than In5, but we are very much part of In5, and we work closely with them as family. So some of the programs that we run are, do keep an eyes out, women founders. There's a pitch competition that happens. It's a 6th edition that we're running. It's not just a competition alone, but it's a great platform for you to take part in, showcase your business, connect to mentors, connect to potential investors, and also connect to other women founders across the MENA region. We started with this just in Dubai, but now we have it across the MENA region, and then you actually go to GITEX, and then to a global finals. And this year, so it moves with the Thai Global Summit. This year, the finals are happening in Jaipur, India, which is in December. And you get to meet around 50, 60 women entrepreneurs from across the world. And amazing things, so it's a great exposure. So there are layers. There will be workshops as well. There's one, is the slides moving, or should I move it? There's one open pitch night that's coming up this Sunday, which is a community event. It's our first one that we are doing. Is it there on the slide? Or? Yeah. So this is happening on this Sunday in Alcus. It's a bikers cafe. It's going to be a community event where we have a few women founders, and there's no stage, sector, anything. We just want more businesses to be founded by women and give that platform where they can talk about it. So there will be other guests who are corporates, investors, etc., as part of the community, but it's wide open to community. Come in with family, kids, expose them to, businesses that are, then the program is also open for applications. So if you have any founders that you know, or if this is the QR code that takes you to the application, so make sure you apply. It's MENA-wide. Make sure you share it in your circles as well. We also have the Thai U program. So this is for students and entrepreneurs. So the Thai Women program, you need to be a licensed business, and the women needs to hold equity in it. You cannot be an idea stage. But for Thai U, this is the early stage program where you can be an idea, it can be a concept, MVP, and then we help you transform that into a business. So we work a lot with the universities. It doesn't matter if you're a PhD undergrad, you're eligible as long as you graduated in the last 2 years or current student. So this is, again, if you know students, make sure they apply a great program. We've seen ideas and amazing innovative ideas, I think, which only that generation can come up with, but they get mapped with mentors to really form a whole business pitch. And then we've seen fundraising. There's this video.
For you in early 20s, here's a secret that most people won't tell you. I'm 24, and this is where I run my startup as a CEO. And here at Unitors, we connect students with tutors, and what makes us unique is that all our tutors are A-star university students. And this is where it all started, my first pitch at Tayu. They gave me a lot of mentorship, guidance, and that little push that I needed and the belief to go all in. Hi, I'm Bamsi, founder of Unitors. Tayu was the platform that helped me build a business from an idea, and today, I lead it every single day. So if you have an idea, don't wait. You can build something real too. Apply to Tayu. This is where it all begins.
So he's an amazing story for us. He actually started this concept when when the pandemic came. He couldn't afford his tuition fees because his parents lost their job, and he started tutoring. And the demand got heavy, and then he built a platform. And then when he pitched with us, he was a runner-up, not a winner. And then he went on to actually register. He's registered in N5 Tech itself, raise his funding within the first year, and now he's building his own leadership skills to make sure that the company scales very well. So really nice success stories. This is just one of them. Make sure you apply. We also have a mentorship cohort which runs in batches. This is for companies that are building companies. We map you with mentors and runs across 12 months. So it should open by next November. But these two programs are the current live ones that's happening. And I think that's about it. I feel like I've covered. I don't have my script. So thank you to all the partners that make the amazing happen. We work through partners and corporates that support us. We have DIC, In5, Paramount, Computers. There's a lot of supporters here as well. Skyline University. And if anybody wants any further information, please connect to us, and also follow Thai Dubai on all social pages. LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook is where we are the most active. So you can sort of see all the programs and apply there as well. Over to Himanshu. Make sure you trouble him enough. He keeps his sessions super interesting and interactive. And I'm looking forward to going away with some key lessons. Thank you, Himanshu.
Okay. So we have about 45 minutes. There are a few slides which we'll have to go through because we'll have to go through them. But failure is such a interesting topic. You can Google, nowadays you can chat GPT, right? Failure, it'll give you enough case studies, history. What do you expect to have in a talk? Personal examples, what else? What is the purpose of the talk? Why are you here? What will you get from it? Yeah. Okay, more courage to fail, fantastic. Maybe you'll realize you don't need courage to fail, but that's a very good answer. Okay, what else? Don't get demotivated when you fail. Don't get demotivated when you fail. Agreed. Strategies. What does strategy mean? When you fail, okay, nice. Let failure, come, join me. Absolutely. So I think, as our former charter member said, let failure be part of the strategy is the right approach. Just by show of hands, how many of you are students? So I know. Okay, nice, fantastic. Please keep your classroom hat on, trouble me. Entrepreneurs, people who have running businesses? Okay, fantastic. Yeah, multiple entrepreneurs I'm not talking about. Okay, so, okay, how many of you, give me an example of what you have failed at. What does failure look like? Anyone bold enough to share failure? And I will share some examples. Anything which which was failure for you, or what you defined as failure, or what you could define as failure as students? Imagine starting a business. What would failure look like? Not having clients? Fantastic. Yeah. That's probably the most common so-called failure. Not having funds and resources. Yeah. Releasing tech issues, always the case. They never work. Oh, nice philosophy. Now come down to what? Tell me a specific failure. Not Google and not ChatGPT. We have all have access to that. Experience. So give me a specific experience. What do you do, ma'am? What do you do? Come in front and tell us what do you do. Come. No. Not allowed. Come here. We can't hear you. We like active participants to be here. Come. You're the only one there. Come. Last one, you cannot. He's not. He's a supervisor, Mr. Mayank. Okay. While you're coming here. Okay. So I think the first thing you need to think about, all of you talked about failure, and we'll talk about how you have described failures. It is, you have described failures at a very superficial level. And that's where the problem is. So what we need to rethink is, if you can get one thing today in your head, I got it. That's okay. Got it. Hold on. I'll come. Control. We'll get there. Yeah. And you'll get. I got where you were going, and we'll come back to you. So I think the concept about failure is all about how you. So what you define as failure, right? So all of you, and we will revisit the specific things you said, whether it was product related, whether it was not getting enough clients, and the failure, is that really what you need to stop at, right? And I think if in your heads, so as an entrepreneur, in your head, if you can redefine what failure is, right? So everyone knows it. Any first Google you do, any entrepreneur, there will be hajar quotes you'll come across. Like ma'am talked about, there'll be a lot of intelligence. It's about, can you actually imbibe the fact that failure is a necessary part of entrepreneurship? So it's not, English is a very limiting language, right? So failure is used in many contexts. But in the context of entrepreneurship, it's actually a positive word. And I don't know of a single business which has not learned from its failure for it to become successful. And we can go into any business, either your friend's business, your own business, the biggest guys, and we'll go through some case studies and learn from what kinds of failures are there, how do we diagnose failures, and what do we do when we face failures, right? So those are the three components we'll look at when we look at failure. But the single takeout for you is, think of failure as, rightly said by TIE members, as a part of the strategy. You have to fail, and that's like building a strategy in doing entrepreneurship, right? It's that necessary for you to build a business. No business gets built without. So I work with a company called SixthFactor. We do market research. So I'll tell you a story about how we started and how we failed. When I have done market research with a company called Nielsen, if some of you know, I used to lead their Middle East Africa business. So I said, let's do entrepreneurship, let's start our own business. We said, market research is dead. We'll do neuromarketing, right? I had set up a nice neuro lab as part of Nielsen globally. So I said, we will do neuromarketing, where we set up headsets, eye tracking, went to clients and said, boss, market research is dead. This was 2012. Market research is dead. Are you mad? You're doing market research. We do neuromarketing. It's the new age solution. Every client, Coke, Unilever, who were the big guys that time, everyone called us from the boardroom meeting. None of them gave us business. 12 months, every boardroom, every CEO had met, zero business. So people fell in two categories. They fell in two categories. And I'll look at this failure and define how it defined us as an organization from there to 100-member team today working with every large brand in the region. what happens from that situation to coming to learning from failure? That's what we want to go into. So you talked about not getting enough clients, right? Tell me more about it. What does that mean in failure terms? Similar, right? What we faced as SixthFactor.
Yeah, hello. Hi. So I came from a corporate background, and I think just like you, probably I started my entrepreneurial journey. I took a biggest risk of coming to Dubai from India, and then I realized, the way probably to enter the new market, I took its own time. So for a long time, I did not have my a client ready, but then I realized there were some skills which I had naturally. So yeah, I'm here since the past 2 years and going good.
Back to my question. Define your failure. You said did not have enough clients.
Did not have enough clients.
You gave me a context of why you didn't have enough clients.
Yeah.
Right? So whatever we face problems like that, like we face, right? So we have now, I have 20 years in market research, very well known in the industry. I have no clients at the end of 1 year, right? At the end of 3 months, but let's say end of 1 year, right? And you have to move fast. The challenge is you start rationalizing that failure by giving a rationale for why that is happening, right? Which is exactly your narrative, which is, I'm not saying right or wrong, right? But the narrative is that I have new in the market. I will see what happens. It is okay. Failure is okay. Everyone, when I went to a talk in Thai and they said failure is very good. So this is failed. So I must be doing very well, right? Because I have failed now, right? So narrative is not getting to the point of understanding what that failure is, right? So failure is a teacher, but you have to learn from it, right? You have to pivot based on that. So what we did in SixthFactor, and obviously not so easily, you can give your mic back, you can sit comfortably. We realized we are not getting clients, but we realized that we got meetings into every boardroom, 100 boardrooms, the largest company. So what that meant is that what we are talking about is useful. We went deep diving into why we failed. So we failed because they felt this technology needs global proof of concept. It needs to be, if you're talking to Coke, you need to go to Atlanta, talk to their HQ. If you need to go to GM, you need to go to their HQ in US. Same with Nestle, go to Switzerland. So they cannot change protocols locally. But they were very impressed with this new age techniques. So we pivoted saying that what we need to say is we still do research. We went back and said, no, we do research, but with a twist. Right? We use the new age technique. So we learned from that saying what was successful in that, what was not successful in getting clients, and how do we reframe. So the learning of the failure was how do I reframe, right? And unless you use your failure to learn, then it stays stuck in the domain of failure, right? You have to think of failure as a strategy for entrepreneurship. If it's a strategy, it has a entire diagnostic, entire tool about how do you deal with it, right? And the same thing happens when you're thinking of a business idea. And we'll come to some of these opportunities, and feel free to, we have 45 minutes, so I'll go through these. These things nowadays, thankfully, you can get your ChatGPT to teach you, right? It's about really understanding one specific issue in deep, saying, this is failure, what do I do with this failure? And picking out some tools which can work for you. So try and pick out those and ask me if you have not understood anything. Another company, so I've been starting many companies, failing with many companies, but very fast, was Go Organic. So we said, health is going up, so let's do organic food trading. We started doing organic food trading, literally, and obviously my wife was fronting this, so we would go to Greens, pick up things from another shop, take it to Green community and sell it to people. I remember for 1 liter of milk, which was for 20 dirhams, we would come from Green community in a fairly non-fuel efficient car, come here, buy the fuel, go back, and then sell it, right? So obviously the business model was what was failing, right? So you have to understand what is failing, but what it told us is what the demand is, what the positioning is, how do we reframe from there and evolve the business into next step. So every time you fail, you keep redefining certain aspect of your business. So the first, last, and the most important thing is reframe failure as to what that means and how you're treating it. And let's look at some of that in the next few slides. If I can get my clicker. Okay. So failure can happen at multiple levels, right? It can happen at the stage of ideation, though I think in case of Slack, it was the entire business model. Does anyone know the backstory of Slack? You know, all know Slack, especially the young guys. Okay, you should. It's a co-working tool with the $1 billion valuation. These slides will be available whenever you want. I will also be available. Just approach through Thai, I will be. So Slack was a very interesting idea. They started a gaming company. They raised 17 million, and this was his third venture. I'll not go into the details, but imagine third venture, first two ventures were a write-off. I don't know, Pierre, if you know the story. And then this gaming they decided to close down because they were not getting enough tech, was not working, right? So it was glitchy, and by the time the characters were coming in place, basically the game was not working. So they decided to close down. Everyone is very da-da-da-da-da. But what they did was they diagnosed what happened. In that diagnosis, they realized that actually the system they had built to communicate was working very well between the gamers and mostly internally. That transformed into Slack, which was bought by like $17 billion by Salesforce or something like that. So humongous amount in 2 years. So it's interesting if you start diagnosing that, where do you see? So failures can happen in different stages. You can have a product failure. Airbnb at one point had a $200 revenue per month. They realized they have fantastic business concept not working, right? So you can stop at saying no clients, right? First thing that people stop at. But it's the levels below that you have to go, why there are no clients, right? What they did was they realized they need professional photos to support the listings. So they flew down to New York, could not support it, did listings, 300x growth, right? And obviously then we know the Airbnb story. So the product was not working, they worked on it. Zomato scaled into 23 markets, was burning at some point 4 million per month, right? So they scaled too fast. They had too much funding, 23 markets. They acquired a company in US, they acquired a company in Turkey. We know they came here in UAE as well. But they were burning, right? So scaled too fast, right? Again, from a early days to I think someone talked about funding. Paytm went through 17 pitches. Everyone told him what an idiot. But what he did, and he's a close friend of Thai and a supporter of Thai. He's been in a couple of our events, and he narrates that story beautifully about his early entrepreneurial journey. But what he did is quickly cut costs. And I'll come to what happens when you do failure. What do you need to do, right? And he kept persisting, changed his business model, sold 50% equity at very, very low price, but then got a 217 million funding and then of course, it was one success after other, and of course, COVID helped. Netflix, what was the issue with Netflix? Everyone knows the Netflix story, right? DVD rentals is what they started with. So what was the issue there in failure? Business model was wrong, right? Because rentals was not, people were going into digital, right? So when you have a failure, if you just stop at saying, oh, I failed, is not enough. Was your idea the issue? Was there a product issue? Was there a tech issue? Was your business model not correct? And therefore the diagnosis of the same. Right? And what I will do towards the end, I'll ask you to think about failures that you have had, and let's look into deep diving into how we can go into any of those specific failures. And it can be real if you are brave enough, or it can be a conceptual one if you want. Okay, so first thing, dimensions of failure. The second thing, actually, so I do market research, right? That's my core market research and consultancy. So the first thing about when you fail is, how do you decode that? How do you go around saying, what does this failure mean? Does anyone know the 5 why Kaizen, Toyota students are raising their, see, this is why I love students. Know everything. Very good. So 5 why is a simple and a stupid technique of asking why 5 times. It works perfectly except for with your wife. Everywhere else, it's a fantastic way to find a solution or a diagnosis. With wife, you get a footwear on your head with experience. Is bad enough. Is bad enough. True. So if you're getting into a problem, let me give you a very, very practical example. So we are working with one of the largest coffee chains in the region. And they had very low registration on their digital app, right? And it went into saying, so people are not registering, and the only way they were communicating was communicating through a standee on the stores, right? Standee on the stores, right? And they had figured out that let people, so the thinking was, people come into the stores, they have a coffee, they love a great experience, which was good till now. They turn around, they walk out, they see an app, and they say, okay, let me register for this app because I love this coffee, I'm going to go get this coffee. So they said, not happening. So 5 why techniques. Why are people not registering? Because they are not aware of it. Why are they not aware of it? Because they do not notice it. Why do they not notice it? Because it's kept at the exit. Why is it kept at the exit? Because we thought that will be the best place to keep. So by asking these 5 whys, they first understood what was the problem. They understood their own hypothesis is very wrong. And then they could, the simple change in this was they kept it facing front so that when the customer walks in, they actually have visually see the app rather than when they go out. So they realized that was the hypothesis which is wrong. So sometimes it's very, very small things, and that comes about in a very structured diagnosis saying, why is this happening? Why is the technology failing? Right? Toyota. So when you, even small things like technology. So for example, Toyota had where this 5 why originated, and therefore the original textbook example when we take university classes. So they're in the car, the floor bed was tilted. In the pickup trucks, the floor bed was tilted. First question, why is it tilted? Because the person did the error. Why did the person do the error? Because they filled up a wrong instruction manual. Why did they pick up the wrong instruction manual? Because the instruction manuals look alike. Why do the instruction manual look alike? Because we don't have a proper guidance or a system of how manuals are stored. No guidance. So the output of that was develop not just this, but that for the overall organization, develop a proper system of how manuals are kept and coded, and people are trained on it, right? So again, when you're failing, it is about very, very structured postmortem. 5 whys is a good technique. There are many other techniques, but what is important is, have you done a structured decoding of that failure? That's only when it can translate into a strategy from a failure. The second is psychological safety. What does that mean? Any guesses? What does psychological safety mean in the context of decoding failure? And I've written all the words there which you can use to guess. But no Googling and ChatGPT. Come on, take a guess. People who have not spoken, and mostly students. Come on, what does that mean? Give me a wrong answer at least, so I will look intelligent by correcting you.
Asking why continuously that you end up in an overthinking loop.
No. So don't stay. So the first one, why, was something we have, is a technique. Forget that. And that why, yeah, unless you're in Hindi, they say dimag ka dahi nahi ho, tab tak poochte raho, right? So that why is meant to get to multi-layers, and with practice you get better with that. No, so stay away from that. What is psychological safety in the context of decoding failures? So your technology is not failing. What is psychological safety there? It's encouraging culture of failure, not in the context of decoding. You're right. And that is a point I'm coming to. So you said, that is a point I'm coming to in the next slide, and that's very important. But when you're decoding failure, in that context, people have to feel it's not to find out who's to blame. And this is very common when tech fails. When tech failure happens, we have often seen that it's about saying who did the programming wrong, was the tech stack the issue, did the right server configuration not given, was the pipes that were created not anticipated, or was the demand not anticipated for the server environment. So it's always about where can I point fingers, and that completely defeats the purpose of learning from failure. So psychological safety in that means that in a team, whether you are a 3-member team working with a supplier or a 100-member team where you have specific departments, the conversation to diagnose failure is in the psychological safety of I will not get blamed if it's my mistake. It's not about taking the blame or blaming someone. It's about diagnosing why we failed and what is the dimensions of that failure. Very important part when you're diagnosing, when you're going into a diagnosis of failure. Cross-functional collaborations, very important. NASA, many organizations, very important, especially when you have a tech team, a go-to-market team, very important when you're invested, when you have 30, 40, 50 plus people. In a small startup like ours, it is more about cross-cultural, is often about working with suppliers and them feeling part of your team. Right? When you're diagnosing failure, saying, okay, I will not blame you, I'll not cut your money, but let's understand what happened for this not to work, right? So your PR agency did a campaign which did not work. You're not getting awareness. Yes, you will take calls about the campaign, but it's with that collaborative mindset. And of course, I think what you said, that if you have that culture, you will have the right talent that will come in. So the first thing we did was we said, imagine what type of failure it is, where has it happened in the cycle, ideation, business model, etc. Then really go into decoding it. And then the first thing which often looks contradictory, right? The first thing is stop the bloody bleed. So people, the first thing that happens is you fail, right? So you are a manufacturer, you have not got the sales. You've got your e-com platform and you have ordered a certain amount of stuff and it's lying in your garage and Amazon is charging you X amount and the supplier in Sharjah is charging you X amount. And these are all real life cases. So the people who are able to pivot and learn from failure versus treat failure as failure is, the first thing they do is, okay, this is not working. I have to stop the bleed. I have to make sure that I can optimize my costs. There are people, I know someone who was a manufacturer of apparel for cricketing, so his thing did not take off because of something. I was amazed at how he went back to the suppliers, had a discussion with them, found new suppliers, renegotiated the cost. Right? And I've seen this stop the bleed as the most important, even the Paytm example I gave. The moment he was not getting funding, gave up the office, started operating from home, did many things to control his cost. So whenever you see so-called failure or a business model not working as per plan, the first thing you need to think about is how do you stop the bleed? And this is not contradictory to saying failure is part of strategy, but saying if this is failing, I need to minimize the bleed from here, the leakage from here, the run rate from here, so that I can invest in reshaping whatever needs to be reshaped. And this, I don't think happens at the speed at which should happen. So everyone knows, like logical hai. Dhanda nahi chal raha, you have to reduce cost. If your business is not running, you have to reduce the cost. It's the speed with which makes the differentiate, right? So the people who are successful are the people who take these calls quick, informed but quickly. Often we are not able to accept that we need to stop the, no, it will work. What did Einstein say, if it's attributed to Einstein, definition of insanity? Different result. I see that so often in entrepreneurship. I'm talking to the entrepreneur, I'm the advisory board. No, so this year we will do 5 million. What will you do? I have these client lists, I have these campaigns, da 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 da. I said, you did the same thing last year. Why will it be different this year? The number of people who are optimistic saying, I'm doing the same thing, and because of that, they don't stop the bleed. But the balancing act is having faith, saying what is the base minimum that you continue to run. And again, that's a dangerous call. But speed and informed decision of stopping the bleed in the context of a certain failure or something not working. The second thing we don't think people do enough when you're talking failure and when you want to take failure to the next level is you don't diagnose enough. You don't go into the layers of where that failure is coming from. Never seen that. You invariably, even we, I mean, now retrospectively, when you look back 10 years, you can look intelligent and memory always remembers only partially. So you only remember the good things you did. Of course, all of us have done stupid things as entrepreneurs. I remember investing in there's a bias called, so in behavioral science, there's a bias where you keep investing behind a loss, right? I'll not go into psychology and behavioral science. Sunk cost bias, thank you. Oh, well, not very common, thank you. I wish I had a book to give to you. Fantastic. So it's called sunk cost bias. So very common with entrepreneurs, right? Because you say, oh, this is a great idea. You keep investing behind it. You stop, because you are already committed to it emotionally. what often does not happen is really understanding that if this product is not selling, is it taste? Is it how am I positioning it? Is it where it is positioned in the supermarket? Is it the context of how I'm selling it? Is it my communication? Is it whom am I selling it to? Is it the price point that I'm selling it at? If it is the price point, what is the price point issue? What are the competition doing? What other products is that person buying? Right? So there is a lot of analysis possible on the back of failure for you to actually start thinking what you should be doing. And that does never happens to the extent it should happen. That I can assure you. Even we, when we fail in our either our own companies or companies we have invested behind, don't spend enough time behind diagnosing that problem, because that's where the success lies, not in the failure. Yes, ma'am. Yes, we do. And if you connect with me, I'll share some examples of what we have done. So again, it depends on the type of failure, right? So the first chart which talked about, is it an ideation? So first thing you need to identify is where is the failure happening? For example, if it's a business model failure, the call you need to take is this a viable or not viable business? First, right? Almost like but if it is a failure which is about product, then it's more about multiple questions about, is the product market fit? Is it the positioning of the product? Is it the pricing value perception of the product? Is it the target that I'm going after? Or is it the communication I'm doing around the product, right? And then if it is the communication, then what is the communication I'm doing? What will be the communication that will work, right? So it will vary depending on each. And more often than not, if you can just stick to the thinking and don't stop till you're frustrated, right? That you cannot diagnose it anymore is a good sign, saying, I'm going mad asking, going multiple layers. But it is the multiple layers which will give you the answer. It is not the first layer, second layer. It is the third, fourth, fifth layer of answers which will tell you what you need to be doing, which will feed that. The other thing which we started doing, actually we did not. I must not take credit for it. This was a company that we were mentoring, and she had this amazing habit of documenting all insights that she would capture. That person actually happens to be my wife. I never give her credit. But she would always come back and write down saying, today I learned this, right? That people, when they talk about health, they talk about it in the context of weight in this segment. Or when I position this, and if I talk in the context of kid, this. So they captured the insights. When I did this campaign on Facebook and changed the algorithm, the campaign dropped. When I did this promotion with this promotion, nothing worked and my sales became half the next day. So what by itself, I see as an entrepreneur, I know everything. But in 3 months' time, when she looked at that document, it was a very, very powerful consolidation of what is happening. And you could see patterns emerge, that whenever you have a campaign, and what we learned from there, for example, is she spends about 50,000 dirhams. She's a small entrepreneur, not a large company, but she spends 50,000 dirhams every month on marketing in social media, one of those, right? And she learned that if she changes anything in less than a week, it de-optimizes the budget. And she was multiple times she burnt money. But when you looked at all those learnings at one place, so, every time we are seeing that we change the campaign, sales have dropped, right? So this idea of kind of putting your failures and learnings in one document and looking at it as a whole, you would see some patterns emerge together. The other thing which happens in failure, in entrepreneurship, it's a very, very lonely journey. I don't know if some of you entrepreneurs realize this, especially if you are the entrepreneur and your husband or wife is getting a monthly income. So I personally ensured my wife became unemployed and became an entrepreneur with me. It worked very well, because then both of us were completely stressed and we understood each other's pain. But if one of you is not, it's like he doesn't earn. He's working 14 hours. There's no income happening. He's more potentially taking all my savings away. So entrepreneurship start is very, very, and on top of that, when you fail, really the psychological impact of that is very, very heavy, right? So now this is true for you. What we don't realize is, as an entrepreneur, if you have 2 people or 20 people working with you or 200, the same impact translates to the team next to you subconsciously. It's how you walk in, it's how you say that good morning, right? So there have to be certain rituals which so we actually have a ritual where I started a retail monitoring service, burnt about $250,000. And I realized my competitors started giving it for free. So Nielsen X company is a competitor. They started doing that as a value addition. So obviously nothing I could sell, had to write that product off because they were giving it for free, whatever I was doing, which was monitoring leaflet at that point, I think 12 years ago. We came to the office. There was an entire team which was working on that initiative for a few months. We had numbers attached to it. So everyone was down, right? But we went there, we made fun out of it. We took out all the pamphlets. We made a ritual of kind of tearing it. And we said, let's celebrate. This was a great initiative. We understand it's failed. We obviously were not foolish. We said, we burnt money, we learned, but it was a great initiative, great idea. These are the things we have learned. So we went around and said, what have we learned? Can we create a document? One of the other things that I really like to help me from that cycle, whenever we fail, if we have failed in go-to-market or technology, we have still created certain what I call assets, asset classes. So when we started business in Singapore, it took us some time to break even. And year one, we were saying, okay, we are not breaking even. Everyone's down. We've not achieved our numbers. But we then went back and said, what assets have we created? And we realized we have created about 120 client conversations. There are 50 clients who are now available with us who will respond to an email for asking for a meeting, right? We have created that equity with 60 clients. Now, just that awareness gave us a feeling that, boss, if we have a product which we are really very powerful, this gives us very quick access to the market, right? So in the failure, while there is something which has failed, in that process, I've created an asset. So if my technology has failed, I've created a learning of what works and what does not work. What tech stack is working? If I have failed in a certain marketing campaign, I have learned what kind of hooks work for what people and what do not work, right? So always remember when you're trying to do a rebuilding mechanism that you have created certain assets class that you want to go after. And the last thing, probably linked to the first, which is stop the bleeding, is as an entrepreneur, you have to have a very clear, well-defined, pre-thought through thing. At what point do you pivot? At what point do you persevere, right? So Netflix pivoted. Airbnb persevered. Right? Now, in retrospect, we can all say they were intelligent, they had foresight. But as a solo entrepreneur, which is starting small, you need to be very clear of that definition, that till what time will you, or what will happen, which will tell you that I need to pivot. And what will happen, which tells you, no, the direction I'm going is clear. So what is that failure looking like? Is the failure of the business model? Is the cost of acquisition of a client? Is it breaking even for a certain point? You have to be very, very clear, and ideally at the start. So you might, whenever you're starting, be very clear at what point you will stop doing what you're doing and change direction, versus you will continue to do it in a more efficient manner and with fine tuning, right? And it's a difficult call, but you have to change those, you have to discuss those parameters probably in the beginning of your journey, and it might evolve. Let me just check the time. And in the meantime, any other failure that you want to pick up? I love that question about what kind of frameworks. Anything else you want to pick up? We have about 10 minutes before I go to the next slides. Any failure that you want to talk about? So I've talked a lot about go-to-market. I've talked about technology. Funding is another difficult one. Someone talked about funding, not getting funding. So at TIE, this is something that we see very, very closely across the world. I think my thinking around that is, if you can get to a mode where you can sustain yourself, right? You have created an MVP, you're not burning cash, and that you have to reach that stage in a finite amount of time by pivoting, by persevering. But if you don't, then you have a certain limit and say, if I don't get funding by this time, I'm not going to invest more money behind it. Right? That's a good KPI or a benchmark to have. Any other aspect or type of failure that you want to talk about? Competition? How's competition failure? I'll just ask questions. Sorry? What are the levels on which you should compete? So there are two ways to look at competition, right? When you're doing entrepreneurship, the basic principle of starting entrepreneurship, everyone says, is you're solving for a problem, right? Let's say, give me an example. So you're solving for a problem for a person to have a healthy meal or a healthy snack. Right? Now, in solving for having a healthy snack, uh, you could have Lay's, which says now I have baked chips. So instead of 10 dirhams, now these are 14 dirhams, right? And you also have companies which have started, which is some of the companies in our portfolio, which says here's a snack for 70 dirhams, right? So I am a little not worried about competition once you've started the journey. Till you have started the journey, when you're doing a business plan, when you're doing your competitive map, total accessible market, your USP, we have 10 minutes, right? Okay, we have 10 minutes, no? Okay, cool. After you've started the journey, I think your priority and the focus should be laser sharp on the customer you are trying to serve. And if you kind of focus on that, I've realized that competition becomes often irrelevant and you find your space. Most cases, if not all, right? B2B cases, we have funded some companies which are doing software solutions, competition comes in, big guys comes in. But once you're laser sharp on a relationship, on how you're serving them, what you can do to serve them, you're fine. So keep that more in context. Now, like I said, one of the things we had to close down because a larger company started giving our product for free. Right now, in that case, it's really nothing we can do. It's competition, it comes in and sometimes, but that's more less. Yeah, in the AI space, it's becoming a little bit of a worry for me because you will do some wrapper on top of a solution and then Google will come and do this. But yeah, we'll see how that landscape evolves. Yes, sir.
Biggest failures, which was continuous failures, of course, was retaining the valuable talent. Because you can have a good strategy, you can have a good product, everything is going well, but the talent which you develop and you are dependent on that, suddenly it's a ready talent for some of my competitor. And maybe they give double than what I give, and it doesn't fit in my financials. So that was the biggest challenge I always used to fail.
It continues, especially in the tech space. It's probably one of the biggest things for anyone who's scaling after a certain point. The two things that I have seen the companies in our portfolio and our companies. So I have not lost any senior person in the 15 years that I've operated, right? Which is good and bad. Sometimes it's good to lose some people, right? Who are not valuable, right? And so then you end up firing them, etc., etc. Yeah, absolutely. But one thing that I've seen that works very well is one, make them feel part of the decisions you're taking. We often underestimate that. So you have a CTO, right? And that CTO so the CTO we have, he feels that he's taking the decisions. He's doing what he's doing, and genuinely so. And second is certain reward which comes as part of the company's growth, however small that is. Right? So those are the two things that have worked sometimes, but talent is obviously in certain cases. Now in the case of AI, for example, a lot of successful AI companies will come up. One product will become $1 billion product. And whoever, like OpenAI, right? OpenAI, whoever has worked in OpenAI in the last 5 years can today walk out of that office, literally. This is your office. You walk out of the office. You hold a placard saying, I'm starting a company. Most likely 1 billion funding starting. They don't want an idea. They don't want a presentation. You worked in OpenAI. Okay, you're starting a company. Here's 1 billion. Right? Then we'll talk what you're doing. Right? So in some cases you can't help, but I think giving them a sense of purpose, giving them a sense of award is an interesting entrepreneurship strategy in the beginning, which keeps the talent to the point that you start scaling up. Yes, sir.
Before 3 years.
I completely agree. So I think this was in one of the traditional communities in India, there's a saying which translates into what you're saying. I was told of it actually much later, I came to realize it. The successful companies that I have seen operate almost on a daily or a weekly thinking, right? And I'll give you an example. So Go Organic, one of the companies we were doing, we realized we are not doing a profit margin which is sustainable, right? So business model is wrong. From that day, in 3 weeks, it had pivoted to providing juices. So designing the bottle, designing the recipes, uh, extracting the juices, deciding a price point, producing these juices using cold press methodology, to selling it to, deciding a price point to selling it to market. So I think you do not have the luxury in today's days to think, you can think of 1,000 days to say that, okay, I'll give myself 3 years till XYZ happens. But the thing we are saying about failure as a strategy needs to be almost lived weekly. So it's almost a weekly ritual where you say, okay, what did I succeed? What did I fail? What did I learn from these failures? Because failures can be micro failures. It can be one small campaign. It could be one small partnership deal that you did with someone as a co-seller, as a partner. And that did not go well because he's not promoting you. Or that you decided you gave a lot more share to it in doing that partnership, right? So I think this has to be, yes, you can give yourself 1,000 days. A lot depends on how much deep pockets you have, what kind of business you have. In certain manufacturing business, it will take certain amount of time to set up that. In certain MVP creations, it will take certain amount of time. But from a failure mindset, almost weekly, if not daily, right? Weekly ritual saying Monday, horrible day, Thursday, Friday, first half, second half, I will review what I did, what were the failure, and apply a certain principle to it, right? And that principle you evolve. The thing is that all of us are super intelligent, one. Two, the tools are all available nowadays, right? So now it is not the days of 90s where now you have the Googles, the chat GPTs, which will give you exactly the tools you need. You need to have the discipline and you need to have the determination that every week I will spend 2 hours to see what did not work for me, what framework do I want to apply to it, like the lady asked, and how do I diagnose and do it continuously, and whatever works for you. But great question. Thank you. More questions from students, please. How will you start your entrepreneurial journey? Any ideas? Anything you're afraid of failing at? Before I go to my last point. Okay, while you think of it. So one of the things that we have seen, and that's why I think the comment here in the beginning of failure being a strategy is very powerful. In the example that we gave of SixthFactor as a company, the fact that we started with neuromarketing and we failed, in the next 15 years has become our strongest strategic advantage. In a survey recently done, we were seen as the most innovative market research firm ahead of Nielsen, Kantar, Ipsos. Here, the image started to carry. So by diagnosing your failure, you actually can learn so much from it that in many cases that translates into your biggest strategic advantage. In the example of Slack, it was only the diagnosis of failure that told us, okay, we can spin this off, right? Many cases, in case of Zomato, again, because they were failing, they were burning so much, they realized what is their core competency, what should be their business model, help them refocus, help them increase their valuation actually significantly. So the perspective you want to have is, when you have a failure, what has that taught you and how will you turn it into a strategic advantage for you by going deep dive? So till you get that answer, stay with the failure. It is always just about living with that failure as a positive word, right? Saying, this is my strategic advantage. What am I learning from this? And if you stay in that space, any failure, happy to connect. Any of you struggling with anything, happy to take you through at least one failure towards the multiple levels where you then translate into a specific advantage that you can use, whatever that looks like. Anything else? That's it. That's my last slide. Are we good on time? So I have 5 minutes for questions. Okay. This is, I don't know whom to interpret the many quotes. I mean, you go on Google and say failure, entrepreneurship, beautiful quotes. I love this one just for the simple reason that what we always talk about, right? You have to become, instead of something that you shun and you say, oh, I did not have failure, it's how you become failure savvy. How do you start using that as a tool that, oh, I failed in this and therefore what I learned and how quickly I pivoted almost on a weekly basis. Or this did not work, I did this innovation, I did this advertising. How do you start becoming savvy at it? Many examples from person who discovered the bulb and how many failures he had, to a more recent example of Mr. Dyson's, creating that vacuum cleaner where he had like more than 5,000 iterations, product failures. Every time he learned, ultimately did make $1 billion impact, but he had the patience to persevere, right? So one thing I would definitely say is, just if you take nothing away, start thinking of failure not in the English word of failure, as we have been told, pass, fail, did you fail in your exam, did you pass? But failure is a word which tells you, how can I succeed? How can I use this as a strategy to succeed in my business? So think of it as a positive word in that context. In entrepreneurship, actually it's a positive word. It's not a play of English language. It's like when you fail in entrepreneurship, you are actually now building onto something next. And that's what we see even when we are investing behind companies. We don't worry about people who have failed, who have closed companies. And that's why people who have housing.com, if you know, in India, 3 failures, he still managed to get 100 million. We were exchanging notes about that gentleman still getting 100 million funding immediately. Because we realize that people learn a lot more from failures than they learn from success. When they go through a place where they are burning tons of money, then we realize that they become more savvy than someone who's just had a very cool and easy ride and did not, because the timing was right or his business model right. So think of failure as a success, and best of luck. Sorry to call you in front. Okay, any other comments? Any comments from you? Every failure is an opportunity. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you realize this, if you really go into the deepness of this, what you have said, you realize how true it is. And that's the difference between hearing the saying and, yes, I know it, versus actually living it. And living it means that you believe that, yes, this failure, how do I translate into a success for my business? And once you get the hang of it, then every time you fail, you do a campaign, you launch a product, you fail, you'll say, oh, fantastic. Literally, you'll come back and say, oh, fantastic. Because you'll come back quickly at speed, diagnose it, learn from it, and go on to the next gap. You have a thought and a vision and a strategy around it. Absolutely. Yes.
I don't know how far, but 3 words I would like to add: negotiation skills, negotiation, finance and law, contracts, and geopolitics.
Absolutely. Very critical for being a successful entrepreneur. Very, very important. The one thing, it's not an entrepreneurship class. I'll try and keep it not to be entrepreneurship class. But in entrepreneurship, you need a fairly wide set of skills. But the most important skill you need is to be able to collaborate and recognize what you don't have and collaborate with people who have that skills. So I don't expect you to have all the skills as an investor, but I do expect that you will recognize you don't have legal skills. You'll find the right lawyer and you will develop a rapport with him so that he can guide you.
Yes, the lawyer will happen when you have that budget to have a good lawyer. But yes.
Yes and no.
But
right. So I've seen a lot of people who can find good lawyers through contacts, and there are all of us live in a social ecosystem. Someone's father's brother's cousins is a lawyer. And I've seen many people leverage that. So I'm not saying that's good, but when you're a student, you'll not get a formal lawyer. But I do want you to have an IP registration. Right? And that's a balance. And that's where you're an entrepreneur. If you have the money, you don't need to be an entrepreneur. You have 100,000 investing, you'll give 5,000. That's not entrepreneurship for me. Entrepreneurship is jugaad, especially in the early stages. So I don't like people who say, when I have the money, I'll do that. Find a solution without the money. You're an entrepreneur.
Hi, can you elaborate a little bit on the psychology of failure for an individual? So failure could mean end of my life, old times when we were living in cave. And that fear is still ruling our minds. So being afraid of failure, because there are consequences. If I'm working for another business and I fail and there are consequences. So, on an individual basis, while thinking of failure positively, how do I battle with the actual fear which my brain as a primal fear it exists already?
So that's where the limitation of the word failure comes in, right? In the way we have evolved in our brains, and as you rightly said, so we have the system one, system two, we have uh, the uh, the reptilian brain where fear and flight sips, and that's the kind of failure we are talking about. Where if something happens, I failed. It's not an accident. The way to do this is what I said in the first slide. The psychology is you reframe the word and don't think of it as failure. You have to say that when you do entrepreneurship, you will learn. There are different ways in which you learn. One way to learn is go to Thai and listen to talks. Brilliant way, right? The other way to learn is talk to other senior entrepreneurs and understand their story and journey, right? The third way to learn is what happens in the business. And what happens in the business is either something that is along the lines you have thought of objectives or against that line. Don't think of it as failure. When something happens against the line, it is a way to reframe your entire thinking and business to do it better. That's what you want to think of failure as, right? Failure is the problem, right? Because we were always said, did you pass, did you fail if you have taken a driving test here, the two words they use. Right? I was so scared of those words. I came at a time where it was a big deal when you got your driving license, like 2000, pre-2000. It's okay. Did you pass your test or did you fail it? This is not, so you're not talking about failure of your business.
It took me 10 times, by the way.
So you share my
10
pain.
times, more than 2 years.
So that's where you
pass.
don't want to hear the word failure, right? But
It has
here,
whole
what
another
happens in business, it is not failure in the sense that you're not closing your business and failed as an entrepreneur. You have something you did not take you towards your goal, gives you a time to rethink. That's how you want to reframe the psychology behind it and take away from that absolute positive, negative connotation of failure that typically it implies. Yeah.
I would like to add something.
Please.
We did everything we could, but the situation didn't allow. For example, COVID.
Absolutely. No, absolutely right. So I think there are situations,
Because
and that's a very good question.
Nobody plans to fail, but you do become a victim of this situation, I would say.
You are very right. He talked about competition. You're talking about socio-political, environmental challenges which might happen. So I think, again, in the entrepreneurship journey, you make a business plan. You say how much is your funding, what are your goals. You have what I call moats and boundary walls. Right? You say, I will invest this much time, this much money, this much effort. Right? This is my capability. Given that I have 2 kids, I had 2 kids when I started entrepreneurship. I left a job which was paying me 6-figure salary to go back to, I don't know what, right? But we had a certain mind saying, I have this much time, this is what I want to do, this is what and I think one of the most important things, and thank you for getting that to everyone's awareness,
Pleasure.
is it's not about being emotionally committed to X business, right? So if the business model has failed because of COVID, right? You decided to do dance classes for everyone to come together, 2 years, nothing can happen, right? Because of COVID. You cannot control it, but you have learned. In that failure, what you would do is you'd be fast, the first part, right? You would quickly take the call saying, this is the situation, cannot happen. You would say, either do I pivot or do I complete? So you say, okay, what have I learned? I have learned people are interested in art. People are interested, but they cannot come. Can I change it to online? So you have to be very, very clear that you need to pivot very quickly. You cannot stick to that idea because it was emotionally yours and you are a dancer at heart and you really want people to come, and it can only happen when they are in the studio. And this is actually a live discussion I had with someone during COVID.
Zoom is a classic example.
Absolutely. And the amount of resistance I found, it took me 6 months, and they burnt a lot of money because they just could not accept that they can teach a dance form digitally. And today they are very, very successful. But it just could not, right? Because emotionally there are art people, they're lovers, they're like, have to have that physical. So you cannot, and probably right, but that's the entrepreneur mindset, that how quickly can you analyze this failure dispassionately and pivot. That was the trick there. Thank you very much. You have been great listeners. I have the last question there, and then we will close. You have a tennis ball or an apple?
Yeah, it's just for relax.
Hand exercises.
Uh,
Yes, sir.
so, sir, like my question is, just now you said that I hate those people who said that I'll start my business when I got the money. Can you please explain it in depth?
This always gets students' attention.
Yeah.
The people whom, so there are two kinds of businesses, and there are two kinds of investors, and there are two kinds of mindsets. And let me be very honest with it. There are people who are part of our ecosystem. They can get 10 million funding at the drop of a hat. They will always have a funded business. And they believe the right entrepreneurship is you get someone's money, start a business with it. And that's a lot of successful people have to do that. Personally, I think anyone who's an entrepreneur, money is incidental to him being an entrepreneur. Right? You need to have that commitment, and you need to have that ability to run with the business. So for example, give me any business idea, right? So for example, you want to start a clothing business, right? You will have to source clothing, design clothing. The true entrepreneur for me will go to 5 people, say, boss, I will give you at cost. This is my designs. These are the material. This is an advantage for you because you cannot get this from any supplier. This is an advantage for me because I will get an opportunity for a business. You create a client. You have created at cost. You have created a business model. Right? Now that is for me as a true entrepreneur. Right? Not a person who will say, okay, I need 100,000 funding, and I have board discussions. Of this, I will get a marketing manager. I'll spend 15,000. I'm not investing behind that person ever in seed funding. But I see a person doing that. I'll say, you're an idiot. Take money from me. And he'll say, I don't want. And I'll say, no, take money from me. That's the right mindset. This is not black and white. In certain cases, you need certain money, to go to your dad and say, Dad, what are you doing? Give me the money. What will you do? You'll not take it with you and go, no. Right? Like my son says, and I'm not giving. Right? So there might be cases where you really need some amount of money, but the mindset is not saying, I'll do marketing when I get this money. I will do product development. Find out solutions. Work with people. You need to have a legal contract. You need to have your IPs. You need to have a perfect design. Hate when people don't have the right visual of their assets, whether it's the product or the website. Today, there's no excuse, especially if you're young. Learn the digital tools. Do it yourself from 12 to 4 a.m. instead of watching whatever you're watching.
But sir, now just what we are seeing, if you have an idea, it's very difficult to have the seed funding in the market. That fund you have to put it from your side, right?
Come to Thai U first. There are many avenues like that. Thai University is a fantastic opportunity where people have started without any funding. You need to, if you can't convince a person without money that you have a great idea, you will not be able to convince if I give you money. That is my fundamental belief. Whether it's a judge, whether it's a client, whether it's an investor. And so, yeah, but I might be wrong. This is my personal view. There are people who give a lot of money to seed investors and make a lot of money in the process. But I think money is incidental to entrepreneurship and true entrepreneurship.
Thank you so much.
Last question. I think I'm available. I love to spend on time. Let's do it over a pizza. Is that fine? Yeah. Cool. Okay. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so much, Himanshu. I hope you've got some, sometimes you walk away with one line that can change a lot of things in what you do. All of this might not be. I have sort of changed the connotation around what we see the word as, the interpretation. The moment you see failure as a downward thing, you see it as a process, part of the process. We love to take a group picture with everyone and Himanshu in the middle, please.